It seems to me that things have got especially visible and ridiculous. The whole,
Sure.
the attempted shooting of Donald Trump, followed almost literally moments later by Joe Biden being, erased from the presidential ticket. Other spectacles like Benjamin Netanyahu and the standing ovations that he received in Congress. Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine being invited to sit in on a cabinet meeting for the new Labour government in 10 Downing Street. It feels as though what many people are now calling the Leviathan as a noun to describe the blob or the deep state, that the Leviathan has never been so on the surface, so visible as it is now. And I wonder at the extent to which, in their final pursuit of digital IDs and CBDCs and 15-minute cities and all of the rest of it, that they aren't actually running scared, and to some extent the initiative is with us. So many of us, millions of us, who have seen the Leviathan surface.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think they're being more overt because, I think they're very arrogant. I think they think that they are very confident in their abilities to manipulate people, which they certainly absolutely can. And they can manipulate people very effectively. But ultimately, I think, a lot of their arrogance is their downfall. But it's up to us, once again, to show that they're wrong and show that we're not powerless, that we're not completely dumbed down and egocentric and just focused on hedonistic pursuits, and that we actually care about the state of the world, the future for our children. We're going to say no to these Orwellian systems that are being rolled out globally. I mean, digital ID is something that is being pushed through so fast. The EU is adopting it now for entry-exit stuff. The UK is going to roll it out next year. The US is pushing for it as the only solution to migration and to voter fraud. And Donald Trump is essentially now a shoo-in, and he's been promoting all of these things on the campaign trail. Where I live in Chile is rolling out digital ID, right after Christmas this year. And it's voluntary for now, but all of these things are going to be voluntary at first, and then they'll try and make it so it's, involuntary, essentially. You don't have a smartphone, you don't have the ID, well, you can't come in here. And I think people, again, need to prepare for ultimately what to do about that, and to sort of, maybe it's inconvenient to not have constant access to these platforms and these things at your fingertips, but there's other things, there's alternatives we can build, and we have time to do that now. And I think that's where a lot of the focus should be, and not so much on the circus. But again, I think people too, what's unfortunate now, particularly in like election season, a lot of people that know that it's a uniparty, whether in the UK or, the United States, that know that, like, in the UK, the Tories and Labour agree on so much more than they don't when they're actually in power, illegal migration just being one example. And then when you look at the US and the Republicans and the Democrats, pro-surveillance, pro-war, pro any other number of things, pro-Israel, pro-oligarch, essentially, at the end of the day, and nothing really ever gets solved. The problems continue. And maybe, the argument ends up being, well, if we elect this guy, the march towards this tyranny will be slightly slower than if the other guy gets in. I mean, is that really the best we can do? And at this point, people that were aware of the uniparty getting sucked into this tribalist mindset of, I support this guy instead of this guy and all of that. I mean, I think we need to step back and realize that voting for the lesser of two evils every 4 years is going to we're going to end up in the exact same place as if we just sat back and did literally nothing. And I don't really think that this is the only solution that people should pursue. I mean, I think it's honestly insanity, especially considering what we saw with COVID, where essentially every country in the world adopted the same policies and it made no sense to do so. And now the people that criticized that at the time, despite all of the backlash and all of the name calling, have been proven right. And now, if you're criticizing both of the candidates in the U.S. presidential race, as I am, I'm getting called accused of rooting for the other guy, or having Trump derangement syndrome, or being a Trumper also, which I was also called during COVID, even though I was very critical of Trump's first term. And it's just this tribalist madness. People really need to snap out of it. They're so good at manipulating us and dividing and conquering us. And we need to realize that this is an issue of us versus them, the them being the 0.1% of this global oligarchy that is taking control of both the public and the private sector, and have essentially created what my colleague Ian Davis calls the global public-private partnership, which is, again, a lot of people in talking about the World Economic Forum during COVID, painted it as communist. Well, it promotes itself as the main broker of public-private partnerships worldwide, which is, really more in line with what Mussolini defined as corporatism, a fusing of the public sector and the corporate sector, or rather, certain corporate monopolies fusing with the state. And that is essentially what we have, and that's what these public-private partnerships are. And they don't work, but we're being pushed into a even greater deepening of them. And I think there's also efforts right now in a post-COVID era that they're going to do a controlled demolition of certain public sector institutions that they've blamed for everything that's happened, and then take things directly into the hands of these private sector monopolies that essentially control the politicians and the public sector anyway, and is essentially just a bait and switch to get people to think that change is coming, but it's not. And this type of hope and change energy, as I call it, because of the initial Barack Obama campaign in 2008, they try and do this with all these different politicians around the world who are routinely disappointing. They did it, with Javier Milei in Argentina, who, since he's been in power, has been like, yes, I'm going to destroy the Ministry of Education, but I want Facebook to be in charge of the Ministry of Education, and Google AI to decide who I fire and who I hire within the government, and outsourcing Argentinian lithium to Israel, saying that he was going to put that he was against the Argentinian establishment, but he's put people that were in the previous very establishment administration, the Macri administration, in his cabinet, including major bankers from J.P. Morgan in charge of the economy, J.P. Morgan being one of the banks that helped saddle Argentina as far back as the 1980s with the insane debt problems it has today. It makes absolutely no sense. Based on what his campaign pitch was. And people need to remember that campaign rhetoric, it's sales pitches to get you to voluntarily acquiesce to the leadership of someone who, in the case of a lot of the politicians running in the U.S. now, they've been president before, and they've made it very clear who they serve when they're in office. And we're being led to believe that it'll be different this time. And they did that with liberals. In 2012 with Obama. Oh, he just needs 4 more years. Oh, it was the Republicans. Oh, it was this that prevented him from doing what he was supposed to do his first term. And then his second term was worse. And I think it'll be just the same with Trump, who bent over backwards during the COVID era. To this global agenda. He called on Silicon Valley to surveil social media users and profile them for pre-crime, so they could prevent shootings before they happen. That's a conservative president. I mean, that's a horrible policy. When COVID was happening, he essentially outsourced COVID era fiscal policy to BlackRock's Larry Fink, and BlackRock handed out all the money that the Federal Reserve printed, and Larry Fink used to handle Donald Trump's personal fortune and stuff. It's crony capitalism at the end of the day. And, if you want to think he's different this time, fine, but we can't put all of our faith and all of our eggs in one basket for people that have already shown us who they are. And I think these political saviors are made up, and they try and get energy behind them in all of this. And so many people that know better fall for it routinely. And I think we need to realize the extent to which we're being manipulated. And even if you know that mainstream media lies, that doesn't mean that other people aren't also lying to you or manipulating to you, because a lot of people, even in independent media, have become very beholden to the same algorithms that mainstream media are now beholden to. And the people that control those algorithms are these same Silicon Valley oligarchs who finance both parties and manipulate, essentially control our politicians. And it's important to keep in mind in the United States as well, that Silicon Valley has essentially merged with the national security state. They're contractors for the military. They're contractors for intelligence, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all of these guys. That's what they do. And they manipulate us on their behalf. In 2014, the U.S. Air Force announced a multi-million-dollar research project to use social media to control people like drones to basically turn people's minds off using social media and manipulate them that way. And militaries around the world, I know it's true in the UK too, with what I believe is might be wrong, but I think it's like the 77th Brigade or something like that. There's all of these military agencies and security agencies focus on manipulating online opinion. And they've invested millions of dollars in bot armies. And do you think that someone that is a contractor for the Pentagon and for these militaries around the world now through SpaceX is going to say no to those same militaries' bot armies that they've developed to manipulate people's opinion on behalf of the so-called deep state that we're all supposed to be targeting and fighting against? I think people really need to take this stuff seriously and realize that, waking up to the illusions around COVID and mainstream media isn't necessarily enough. We need to keep our guard up. We need to think critically and rationally. And we need to question everything, and we need to go straight to the source. That's why I make an effort in all of my articles to extensively hyperlink and source everything I say. Please go engage with that material yourself. Look at the things I researched and the sources I used and draw your own conclusions. Maybe you don't agree with me. But I think, a lot of people that woke up, I guess, from mainstream media have moved to maybe different sources, but their relationship with media is the same. Just listen to what the person says and take their word for it, and don't do any due diligence or research. And I think people need to become, just like we need to take individual responsibility with our lives, we need to take responsibility for the media we consume as well, and become active consumers of media, not just passive media consumers, or we'll just continue to be manipulated in this way and distracted.